David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
There's been a multi-year story that we've been following, and it's the story of Brexit. And the primary question has been, will Brexit happen or will it not? Is Britain going to leave the European Union, or are they going to end up staying? And as I said, the day after the vote, June 23, 2016, it may never happen. Brexit may never happen. And of course, we now know that if the vote were to be held again today, Remain would likely win, although there are questions of, listen, they did vote this way back in 2016. For how long does that vote remain considered the will of the people? There are all sorts of questions like that. But more recently, there have been much more pressing sort of obstacles. The former Prime Minister Theresa May, multiple times attempting to finalize a deal to structure the leaving of the European Union and failing. And ultimately, the question was will she be able to outlast the criticism and the calls for her to leave? And ultimately, she left and Boris Johnson came in. Boris Johnson, Trumpian in many ways, certainly physically in his physical appearance, although that's not the most important way, the leader of the Conservative Party, now the Prime Minister. Will he finally do Brexit? For the nationalists and the isolationists who want the UK out of the EU, or will he also fail? And so far, it's really not working particularly well for him. He has, between having one Tory MP defect and kicking 20 others out for not supporting him, he very quickly seems not to have the numbers that he needs to get to the next step in the Brexit process. So bottom line, there has been one defection, a Tory MP who bailed on Boris Johnson's party. 20 other Tory MPs are Tories, or at least they were, but they didn't go along with what Boris Johnson wanted, and they were ejected. And now all of a sudden, Boris Johnson finds himself in yet another one of these embarrassing scenarios for the pro-Brexit side, giving the opposition control of the agenda in Parliament. Johnson is soon going to have to face those prime minister's questions for the first time, which can get very, very crazy. The opposition, of course, is going to continue to try to delay Brexit, and Boris Johnson may call for a general election. Really a devastating defeat for Johnson. I know that, the standards and the sort of rules of decorum and how to interpret political happenings in different countries can be difficult when we're not familiarized with the system and for what the sort of Overton window is for what we can expect in terms of what is possible on one side and the other side. But this is an embarrassing defeat for Johnson. Here's video from yesterday in Parliament where members of Johnson's own party abandon him and vote to allow a debate to once again postpone Brexit. And the question becomes, does it seem as though this is ultimately turning into an indefinite postponement? Total chaos breaking out. Take a look at the first clip.
The ayes to the right, 328. The noes to the left, 301.
Not a good start, Boris.
Order. The ayes to the right, 328. The noes to the left, 301. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock.
Another Burko fix.
Order. Of course. Point of order. The Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let there be no doubt, Mr. Speaker, about the consequences of this vote tonight. It means that Parliament is on the brink of wrecking any deal that we might be able to strike in Brussels, because tomorrow's bill would hand control of the negotiations to the EU, and that would mean more dither, more delay and more confusion. And it would mean that the EU themselves would be able to decide how long to keep this country in the EU. And since I refuse to go along with that plan, we are going to have to make a choice, Mr. Speaker. I don't want an election. The public don't want an election. I don't believe the right honourable gentleman wants an election. But if the House votes for this bill tomorrow, the public will have to choose who goes to Brussels on October the 17th to sort this out and take this country forward.
What I love about the system is that Trump definitely couldn't handle it. And I'm reminded of it because when you look at Boris Johnson, the look on he looks very Trumpian, like I said, but he has a slightly more wit about him expression on his face than Trump. Can you imagine Donald Trump ever having to handle something like this? I mean, the guy just literally could not. He'd implode under this kind of actual intense scrutiny. And this continuing to build as eventually Boris Johnson suffering abandonments and real chaos breaks out, Jeremy Corbyn ultimately speaking.
There is no consent in this House to leave the European Union without a deal. There is no majority for no deal in the country. As I've said before, if the Prime Minister has the confidence in his Brexit policy, when he has one he can put forward, he should put it before the people in a public vote. And so, he wants to table a motion for a general election. Fine, get the bill through first in order to take no deal off the table.
Order. Point order. Order. Very rude for members. Order. 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 I say to the Chancellor of the Duchy that when he turns up at our children's school as a parent, he's a very well-behaved fellow. He wouldn't dare behave like that in front of Colin Hall, and neither would I. Don't gesticulate, don't rant, spare us the theatrics. Behave yourself. Be a good boy, young man. Be a good boy. Point of order, Mr. Ian Blackford.
Things are really getting crazy. And what's even wackier is that this was all merely a debate over what to order for lunch. No, I'm kidding. But I still believe in the end that it is a likely scenario that the UK may never leave the European Union. If it does, it may not happen under Boris Johnson, the way his prime ministership has been going in its very early days at this point in time. And we actually are asking you what you think will ultimately happen. We've polled our audience every, once a year or so since this has gone down, since the vote went down in 2016. If you go to the community tab on the David Pakman Show YouTube channel, youtube.com/The David Pakman Show/community, do you think the UK will ever actually Brexit? We will have results either later this week or maybe early next week. We all knew it was going to happen because all the signs were there, but it's now getting into overdrive. Trump allies are now reportedly raising millions of dollars to pay to find damaging information about journalists who are seen as unfriendly to Donald Trump and the Trump administration, and to then, ideally, use that information to create antagonism campaigns against journalists, potentially to try to get journalists fired. Certainly there will be harassment from Trumpists on the basis of this opposition research campaign against members of the free press that Trump allies are undertaking. And you can't miss the forest for the trees here. This is a hallmark of authoritarian dictatorships. This is a hallmark of police states. This is everything that is the opposite of what the United States is supposed to be. This is Putin-like. This is Duterte-like. And we knew Trump liked it. We knew Trump liked going after the media, Trump going after specific media outlets, even specific journalists in some cases. The fake news moniker applied very haphazardly, not to fake news, but merely to anything that doesn't say glowing, effusive things about Donald Trump. And this is now an attempt to formalize attacks on individual and specific journalists. These are attempts in practice to silence or ruin the lives of people who are reporting critically about the President of the United States, one of the most important things that a free and open press can do and should be doing. Axios has obtained the fundraising pitch, which has been deployed to get people to donate to this cause, the cause that will ultimately gather information that can be used to harass or discredit journalists and reporters. Can you imagine getting an email and being so disconnected from reality having your priorities or your morality so backwards, having such a fundamental misunderstanding of what it is that is important in the United States of America when it comes to a free press. Imagine getting an email saying we are raising money to go after journalists that are antagonizing us, and saying, you know what, that sounds like something I want to donate to. And apparently it isn't enough to just call certain news outlets fake news and go after them. Trump's allies now want to go after specific reporters. One of the people involved is a Republican consultant named Arthur Schwartz. The primary targets of this campaign are said to be, and listen to this, CNN and MSNBC, not surprising, all of the broadcast networks, okay, the New York Times, the Washington Post, both of which have been doing extraordinarily good, just plain old-fashioned investigative work about this administration, BuzzFeed and the Huffington Post, and, this is the kicker, anyone else routinely included in what a Trump supporter sees as bias and misinformation in their coverage of Donald Trump, meaning it could be anybody. I spoke to a couple of friends in Washington, D.C., who are not Republicans. They're not directly involved with this, but they've been in touch with people who have knowledge of what's going on. They told me independent media journalists that are seen as particularly antagonistic to the president are not out of the realm of possibility for being targeted and harassed. I am not, this is not a delusion of grandeur where I think I am on Trump's radar or on the list of people that this group is going to come after. I've merely been told that it is not just corporate media that is on the radar in terms of this campaign. So let's immediately put to rest the Trumpist talking point, which I've already seen floating around, that this is no big deal. This is the same thing Media Matters does. Media Matters criticizes and publishes media clips. They aren't going about trying to attack and discredit individual reporters in the way that is being suggested here that Trump's allies want to do. We've seen this before. And where we've seen these attempts to harass and target individual journalists, it's places where human rights have been decimated in any number of ways. Russia, World War II era Germany, the Philippines, Venezuela. This is, if we allow it to happen, the normalization of fascistic behavior. It doesn't mean we are a dictatorship, but it is authoritarian, fascistic behavior. Attack media as fake news, treat them poorly, kick out individual journalists, talk about journalism licenses and lawsuits against media, and then smear campaigns against individual journalists for being journalists and doing their jobs. This is, call it what you want. Is it North Korea? Is it Stalin? Is it all of them? And a word, by the way, to the gun nuts. You know how the gun nuts say we need guns to defend ourselves from a government that becomes tyrannical? This is actually the type of thing that if one believed the government would become tyrannical, would be sort of at the top of the list, starting to clamp down on a free and independent press. And yet I'm not hearing from any of the gun nuts that they're worried about this. In fact, a lot of the Trumpist gun nuts love this because they've fallen hook, line, and sinker. They've drank the Kool-Aid, to borrow a term from Jim Jones. They've drank the Kool-Aid, or not a term, but an action, I guess. They have drank the Kool-Aid on the media is the enemy, and we need to be going after them rather than defending them because it is a form of potential government tyranny. This is a form of tyranny by special interest group, to put it another way, but it happens to be one that the gun nuts don't seem acutely affected by in a way that makes them realize, oh man, our threats, our fears about tyrannical government, they're actually not the kind that we really need the guns to defend against, but this is starting to look like a form of government tyranny. Understand that the biggest threats to Trump's presidency are the things that make the United States what it is. A free press is a threat to Donald Trump's presidency because he needs to hide the truth to justify his reelection. If people know the truth, there's no path to reelection because his record is so atrocious. High voter turnout is a threat to Donald Trump's presidency. Well, we know why that is. Trump benefits from people not voting or not being able to vote. This is real. This is happening now. And it has to be stopped in its tracks before it even gets going. Make sure you're following me on Twitter at @dpacman. Let me know what you think. Follow the show on Twitter at David Pakman Show. And make sure to sign up. If you have Amazon Prime, subscribe with Twitch Prime at twitch.tv/David Pakman. This is free for everyone who has Amazon Prime, but it supports the work that we do, twitch.tv/David Pakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, today's new members of the day are Logan Morrison and Sean Ouvry. Logan and Sean, I really appreciate your support. This is a program that depends on your support, okay? Go to joinpakman.com. Takes under a minute to sign up. We get 97.1% of every payment. We pay just 2.9% to process credit and debit card payments, and the rest of the money goes directly to the show. Once you sign up, I hope you'll stay signed up. Chris Tripp is today's longtime sustaining member of the day. He's been with us almost 5 years. Really appreciate your support and everybody's support. Take 1 minute out of your day and sign up at joinpakman.com. It is time for Hatriot Mail. What is Hatriot Mail? This is Hatriot Mail.
We're getting to the oranges of this investigation. So God bless the United States of America. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
This week's Hatriot Mail introduces a new term. We've talked a lot about impeachment on the program as a possible means to remove Donald Trump, although I don't believe that it will. Today, we are introducing a new term. Take a listen to this.
Impeachment will not get Trump out of office. It will backfire spectacularly and propel him to a landslide victory. I can't believe David Pakman admitted to being evil. Progressives reveal in their naivete as though it's some kind of innocence. Trump is behind you, David. Feel the love. Lol. See what I did there? I guess this long comment qualifies me as unhinged.
You know, I have to say, I agree with the Hatriot. I don't believe that impeachment is going to remove Trump. I just don't see it happening. And I think we've got another Urban Dictionary word that could maybe be added in with a definition referencing the David Pakman Show. Impeachment, I and all Hatriots seem to be united. We will not remove Donald Trump from the White House with impeachment. And I encourage you to pass the word along. Make sure to fight Hatriotism by using the coupon code Hatriot40 when you sign up for a membership at joinpakman.com. You go to www.joinpakman.com. You choose a monthly or a yearly membership of your choice, doesn't matter which one. You hit the red sign up button. And when you're offered the possibility of inserting a coupon code, you put in Hatriot40. That's Hatriot 40, Hatriot40. Your membership price will be instantly dropped by 40%. And Hatriots see this as a failing of their Hatriotism. When people hear Hatriot Mail, and instead of abandoning the David Pakman Show, they instead go to our website and sign up with the coupon code Hatriot40. This is just so devastating for Hatriots that I encourage all of you fine folks to do it. There's no way to introduce this next story other than simply to tell you what happened, which is that Donald Trump congratulated Poland on the 80th anniversary of World War II. Of course, the Holocaust sort of started with Germany's invasion of Poland. It's not exactly something to be congratulating them about. Other leaders sent messages of somber remembrance and reflection, some even warning about sliding back towards the type of authoritarianism that we saw early in the Third Nazi Reich. But Trump congratulates Poland for having been invaded by Germany 80 years ago. Take a look at this.
Yeah. I do have a great message for Poland, and we have Mike Pence, our vice president, is just about landing right now, and he is representing me. I look forward to being there soon, but I just want to congratulate Poland. It's a great country with great people. We also have many Polish people in our country. It could be 8 million. We love our Polish friends, and I will be there soon.
There is no question. I mean, the analysis here is very simple. Trump has no idea what Poland's role was in World War II. He just had no idea what the historical context was. So he said, I congratulate them. I mean, he just doesn't know anything. That's it. Trump was going to go to Poland for the World War II remembrance. He canceled the trip because of Hurricane Dorian. So he was asked instead for a message on this anniversary of a very, very dark day for Poland back in 1939. And his message was, congratulations. What was possibly the darkest day in Polish history, and Donald Trump congratulates them. This is indistinguishable from satire. If I said to someone, what's the worst possible thing you could say to Poland on the 80th anniversary of being raped and pillaged by the Nazis? Congratulations would be pretty high on the list. He does not know what happened in World War II, period. Poland lost a fifth of its population during World War II. A much bigger percentage of the Jewish population was lost in Poland during World War II. Congratulations, guys. A message of congratulations. This is not very different than congratulating Israel on Holocaust Remembrance Day. I mean, it's absolute and total idiocy. The only other possibility I can think of, and tell me what you think about this, Trump saying this happened because he doesn't know what happened to Poland in World War II is one explanation. There's a more sinister one, though, which is that Trump knows Germany invaded Poland in World War II and he likes it. I don't actually think that that's what's going on here. I try not to attribute to malice what can be more than adequately explained by stupidity and ignorance. And in this case, Trump has shown and demonstrated over the last many years no knowledge of history whatsoever. And so I would attribute this to ignorance and not malice. We're only a few days from the 9/11 anniversary. What is Donald Trump liable to say then? Not good. Not good. Make sure you're following me on Instagram at david.pacman. And while you are there, follow the show on Instagram at David Pacman Show. We will take a quick break. Our long-form deep dive into the regulation of social media is coming up next. Really, really important topic. And then much more coming up after that.
The David Pacman Show at davidpacman.com. Welcome back to the David Pacman Show.
Many of you know I've been talking a lot lately about YouTube policies and algorithms and how they affect our show and other shows. There's been a lot of demonetization. YouTube's been barring independent political shows like ours. And there's a bigger conversation about social media and censorship also happening, which really exploded the day I was on the Joe Rogan program involving Steven Crowder and Carlos Maza and that debacle, as well as recent content and policy enforcement on Twitter. And this has really been relevant for years, but lately it's been snowballing, in particular with channels like ours and other political channels, because there's a lot of misconceptions about why YouTube and Facebook and Twitter are doing what they're doing, as well as exactly what it is that they're doing. So let's talk about how users and content creators are affected, but then talk about the big picture issues in social media and how we should be thinking about them. I'll tell you what the problems are, but I'll also tell you what the problems are not, and maybe most importantly, the solutions that we should be looking at. So on platforms like YouTube and Twitter, the more popular you are as a content creator, the more likely you are to be targeted with censorship and demonetization if and until you get big enough to be exempted from some restrictions because of a special account status that can be available in some cases. But then social platforms will sometimes enforce policies differently when there's a high-profile controversy. They'll be accused of platforming harmful speech or of being anti-free speech. They start feeling the heat from the public, from one side or the other, and then they start making decisions and enforcing policies in ways we haven't necessarily seen before. And often those enforcements will happen in ways that fly directly in the face of both the letter and the spirit of the terms of service of a platform or their mission statement about free expression and dialogue or whatever. And sometimes they'll even end up making up new policies on the fly, right in the middle of a scandal. Sometimes I'll happen to agree or disagree with a specific call that a company might make, whether it's taking someone off of a platform or reversing a ban on someone who I didn't think actually deserved it. But the problem, as I've said before, is the inconsistency. A company will claim to stand for certain values, and then they'll fold under pressure when it's a better PR move to do the opposite. And it creates a completely dysfunctional ecosystem for everyone. And sometimes the problems are even more fundamental. We upload about 8 videos to YouTube a day. And on some days, as many as 75% are demonetized for not being, quote, brand safe. So we don't make any money from those videos. Sometimes it's predictable based on YouTube's demonetization guidelines, but the problem is the effect that this has on our ability to produce serious news without concerns about monetization. To be clear, I wouldn't and I haven't changed the content of the show to stay monetized on YouTube. I cover the stories that are important. YouTube can and does demonetize them, but the David Pakman Show is a small business, and I need to make projections and have an understanding of where will revenue come from. So this application of policy is a distraction from simply producing the best content we can. If YouTube will allow us to collect revenue from our videos, that's great. Or if a large portion of our videos will be demonetized, then we need to deal with it and figure out how else to fund the show. The real problem is that by all accounts, our content should be monetizable. We don't show graphic violence. We don't use profanity. I'm never sitting here using drugs or harassing people or belittling people based on their race or gender. Our content would be monetized were it not for advertisers imposing their will on YouTube and YouTube having little choice but to go along with it. This is not a left-wing, right-wing thing. People on the right like to say it's happening to them because they're conservative, but it's happening to independent political shows that are across the political spectrum, including mine. It doesn't seem to be affecting the big corporate media outlets that have YouTube channels nearly as much. And sadly, this is part of a theme we've been seeing with YouTube lately. Independent political channels on the left and right, the David Pakman Show, Kyle Kulinski, Steven Crowder, these types of people, we've realized that YouTube is in general hindering our shows and deterring people from watching, bolstering legacy corporate media outlets that have YouTube channels, whether it's CNN, NBC News, or late night talk shows. In July of 2018, YouTube actually made an announcement that they would start making, quote, authoritative news sources more visible on the platform. In a press release, YouTube said, "Today we're announcing steps we're taking with the Google News Initiative to support the future of news in online video and product features we've been working on to improve the news experience on YouTube. We believe quality journalism requires sustainable revenue streams and that we have a responsibility to support innovation in products and funding for news." They go on to say authoritativeness is essential to viewers, especially during fast-moving breaking news events. So we've been investing in new product features to prominently surface authoritative videos. When you're watching a YouTube video, you see a list of other suggested videos on the right side of the page on desktop or below the video on mobile. When you're finished watching a video, before the next one plays, you see a similar set of suggested videos appear. What shows up here, these suggested videos, is controlled by YouTube's recommendation algorithm. A large portion of our traffic has always come from these suggestions. Someone's watching a video about whatever, YouTube suggests they watch another video by the David Pakman Show about a related topic. This has been a really important source of video views for us, and it's a really good way of allowing people to discover our channel for the first time. Our YouTube dashboard tells us where our video views come from, and we're now getting only about half of the recommendations that we were getting about a year ago. And the decline started right after YouTube announced they would prioritize, quote, authoritative news sources. So not only is YouTube demonetizing the views that we do get, they're also causing us to get fewer views to begin with, which hurts the channel. Now, this is not some underhanded plot to destroy the David Pakman Show. Yes, they're changing their algorithm in a way that hurts us, but I understand what they're trying to do and why they're trying to do it. Sadly, this is the same reason that Breitbart and InfoWars and other extremist fake news sites don't show up in search results when you go to news.google.com. Google and YouTube want to placate advertisers by preventing accusations that they are perpetuating or allowing the monetization of misinformation, fake news, hate news, and extremist content. But the reality is that whatever the motivation, my channel, similar independent channels, which should not be lumped in with fake news and hate channels, are getting caught up in it. And frankly, it could destroy many of the channels like ours if it continues. And so far, it's continuing. We all know the types of channels YouTube wants to make less visible. The Sandy Hook conspiracy people, alt-right extremism, red pill, black pill people, misogynists, racists, homophobes, people targeting others on the basis of sexual orientation. All of the types of channels that over the years, YouTube has gotten a lot of flack for platforming. YouTube is fighting a negative image of, in part, being a garden of nut jobs and hate and extremism. YouTube wants to fix their brand and maintain their brand. I can see why they want to do that. But shows like ours are getting hurt by the algorithm to the detriment of speech and ideas. To understand how to interpret and deal with this, we need to have some shared starting point. Something that many people do, which completely fails to properly frame the conversation about censorship and demonetization, is to say that YouTube and other social media companies like Twitter and Facebook are left-wing. They say these platforms are silencing or disincentivizing speech that's politically incorrect or speech that is generally considered offensive when it comes to race, nationality, gender, sexual orientation, religion. Many people are taking this and concluding that the social media companies have a left-wing agenda. Yes, hateful or offensive speech is more likely to come from someone on the right. When Steven Crowder calls Carlos Maza a gay Mexican lispy queer and gets his videos demonetized, that's not something you're really going to hear from people on the left very often. And it's the kind of speech that's going to get you in trouble on some of these social media platforms. In that sense, it's possible that right-wingers face more repercussions than people on the left. I don't know that to be the case, but it's possible. But using that to say that these companies are fundamentally progressive or left-wing doesn't actually help us understand these issues, and it's not accurate. Conservatives have a conspiracy theory that social media companies are simply bleeding heart political activists waging an ideological war against the right. The reality is these companies have no, as companies, ethical or ideological philosophies or positions. They are motivated by business interests. These companies, by the way, as I said to Joe Rogan, are also very right-wing or libertarian, right libertarian in many ways in terms of the policies they support and the role that they play. Google is currently in an antitrust battle with the Department of Justice. Facebook is the subject of a huge antitrust investigation by the Federal Trade Commission. These companies are huge tax dodgers. They want to self-regulate. They lobby for deregulation, the same as the air polluters and the big banks and the gun manufacturers. What Google and Facebook and Twitter do every day in Washington is, in the most literal sense, the opposite of progressivism. Having an internal culture that's socially progressive, first and foremost, doesn't mean that as a company they are progressive in their public role. But in addition to that, even what appears to be left-wing internal culture is often just brand management. Their politically correct content policies and the way they enforce them and what they say publicly about content policies. It's not virtue signaling. It's a signal to their advertising clients and to their shareholders. And this should be obvious. YouTube and Twitter clearly have no authentic, principled stance on protecting offensive speech or on combating offensive speech. This was most recently demonstrated by their flip-flopping, embarrassing flip-flopping on the Crowder-Maza situation. One side got mad at YouTube. YouTube conceded. The other side got mad at YouTube. YouTube then conceded to them. They panicked. They tried to find the right balance between protecting their image in the eyes of advertisers and understanding that that's the source of their revenue, but protecting their image in the eyes of the public as well, who are the people that need to watch those advertisements. YouTube isn't evil or virtuous. Twitter isn't left-wing or right-wing. These are corporations. They exist to generate revenue and perpetuate themselves. So maybe you're saying, well, we still have this problem, though, that these companies have a monopoly on social media and they're silencing offensive speech. They're recklessly demonetizing political commentators who don't deserve it. And that is what we're faced with. A solution that's often proposed is that we regulate these companies, that we use the government somehow to enforce free speech on the platforms, which is already problematic language. They want us to treat these platforms like public squares, establish free speech protections for all of the users. But these arguments fall flat. The First Amendment protects you from censorship by the government, not by private entities. The government shouldn't be able to force a company to allow you to use their software and their networks. This isn't a civil liberties issue. Social media companies do and should have every legal right to maintain and enforce their own content policies, to prioritize certain content, to protect their brand, or for any other reason that they have, or none at all, unless they're doing something like discriminating against users of a certain race or religion, which violates the law. What government body is going to enforce so-called free speech on social media? Is it going to be Congress, whose political bias changes every few years? Will it be the FCC or the FTC, as Donald Trump is thinking of doing, whose political bias also changes every few years? We know that the current administration wants, based on this executive order that they're putting together, for them to be the ones who decide, based on their politics, who gets to say what and which platforms get punished. That's dangerous. Conservatives don't want this type of government regulation anywhere else. They just want government regulation here because things haven't been going their way. The free market has demonstrated that offensive content is bad for business. And they now want special big government nanny state protections against what is being caused by free market capitalism, quite frankly, or the version of it that we have. I'm being negatively impacted by one of these companies. YouTube is hurting me financially. They're diminishing my ability to voice my opinion. But that's not making me lose my objectivity about the rights of private companies or how impractical it would be to have the government oversee social media content. The first step in the correct direction is going to be for us to stop viewing social media as one collective thing or entity. Different social media platforms serve different purposes. Twitter has developed a service that's very different than Facebook. The mechanics are different. The culture is different. The etiquette is different. Some platforms allow porn, some don't. Some platforms allow spamming, some don't. Some platforms require you use your real name and others don't. All social media platforms are different because they're geared to different markets and have different purposes. The average person using Tumblr is different than the average person using Quora, for example, or at least they use the two platforms for very different reasons. Social media companies intentionally develop their platform to have a particular environment catered to the market they want to serve. In the same way that a platform designed for professional networking wouldn't be any good as a medium for sharing funny memes and vice versa, a platform designed to serve a somewhat universal mainstream user base and attract mainstream advertisers may not function properly as a platform for exchanging controversial ideas or vice versa. Many social media platforms that are marketed as free speech alternatives to mainstream platforms, some are I like personally, others seem to be cesspools of hate and sketchiness. But the idea of forcing that content onto privately owned platforms that don't want it and may be financially harmed by it doesn't make sense. YouTube serves a particular purpose. It's an invaluable service to the vast number of content creators who otherwise wouldn't have a platform to so lucratively distribute their content. It's been a really great thing for most independent video creators. I've been asking for a more clear understanding of how the demonetization works as it pertains to my content. I'm not creating content that's fringe or extreme or disturbing or gory or whatever, the way that YouTube is suppressing many independent channels as if they were doing that is antithetical to what made YouTube cool and interesting to begin with. But ultimately, it is YouTube's right. It's my right to complain about it. It's my right to leave YouTube or start my own YouTube if that's what I want to do. Maybe it is actually the best business decision for them. Maybe it's just more worth it to YouTube to take a better safe than sorry approach to the way that they're demonetizing me and to just push the corporate media channels and not worry too much about the collateral damage to programs like mine. In the end, I don't know that I can do that much about it. This is why it's so important for the audiences of independent political talk shows like ours to realize that the shows can only exist unfettered through direct support from the audience, especially if the YouTube algorithm and the demonetization stuff gets worse. It's not just a talking point. It's not a way to get people to sign up for David Pakman Show memberships. It's just reality. If we don't have reliable YouTube revenue and we don't have reliable financial support from the audience, we may have to figure out something else. Maybe I'll have to get a different job. If you're not on YouTube to watch makeup tutorials or cat videos, and what you want to do is watch content like ours that's trying to shake things up, trying to deal with serious issues in an adult way, and rubbing some people the wrong way, admittedly, then maybe we all need to assess our roles as consumers of shows like this one. Even though these shows can be accessed for free, there are costs to the creators. Employee salaries, employee health insurance, rent, internet, electricity, equipment, connectivity, so many other things. A political commentary show relying more on direct support from the audience than on YouTube ad revenue is actually probably a better paradigm for everybody involved. It means that if you are a patron of something that you value and you're educated and entertained by it, instead of you and your clicks becoming a commodity to YouTube's bottom line through your cable subscription or watching ads or whatever else, it would mean content creators would be more free to do and say what they want, unbeholden to advertisers. And that freedom and integrity is something that's crucial for shows in the political commentary sphere. It probably also means that you might even end up with more content creators to choose from because they'd be better funded, or you'd have higher quality content because people doing this part-time could focus on it full-time, as an example. When you pay for content, you're not just getting what you paid for, you're investing in something you value so that it can sustain and grow and improve. So this is not a promotion for our Patreon page or our membership program. This is something I personally find not only fascinating, but of crucial importance from a media studies point of view. And it's something that applies to the entire digital media industry. These are my thoughts, but it is something that is affecting online political shows like this one. And I do believe that independent political shows are particularly important to protect when we see this administration wanting to come up with new and novel ways to suppress speech they don't like and to mandate speech they do like be published, regardless of what a private company wants to do. What we ultimately need is a big picture meta shift in how we think about online content, how we consume it, and what we are willing to do to sustain it and guard it from outside influences. And I hope that's what you'll take away from this today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
It's been a while since I had a clip for you of just good old-fashioned religious nuttery that's indistinguishable from mental illness. And I've sort of been getting away from these sorts of clips unless they're linked to something in the news, because I think most of the audience at this point has a pretty good understanding and sense of this completely unhinged religious zealotry. But today we actually have an example of religious nuttery that's directly linked to the news, and specifically Hurricane Dorian. Hurricane Dorian is a real thing. People have died. Untold damage is being done. President Trump sending confusing messages about it, saying it's going to hit Alabama, but it isn't. And there are people refusing to evacuate. This is real. It's as real gets. There are people who are losing their lives and at risk of losing their lives because of this storm. And in the midst of all this, in comes a grifter named Kat Kerr, who shows up and records herself commanding the hurricane with a stick in the name of Jesus in some kind of bizarre prayer. I don't even know what to call it. My question is, can we call this anything other than mental illness? Is there any other categorization for what I'm about to show you? Let's look at it together.
So right now, at this moment, we take authority over Dorian that has no right off the coast of this state or anywhere. And we hit that storm to the east right now. And I'm going to do it 3 times. We hit it to the east. We hit it to the east and command it. You go to the east, out away from land. We declare you would do no destruction in any way whatsoever. Won't tolerate it. So, Father, I thank you for this honor. and privileged to be here on the little coast of Florida. And we say to that storm, your end is coming. We don't tolerate your presence. We won't tolerate you coming ashore anywhere or causing any harm, death, or destruction. We speak on behalf of those who've already been affected by it, God. We thank you for a rapid recovery and restoration for all of them right now. But we decree and declare, you, Dorian, your days and hours are numbered, and we bash you.
She tells the storm that its end is coming. Well, yeah, I mean, storms end eventually. That's not much, that's not very prosaic, I must say. Do we just need to call this what it is? Mental illness. How else would we describe something like this? This is like a crazy person yelling at a cloud. I mean, this is no different. And if you look more into, I've never heard of this person before, but so many people emailed me that I said, I've got to figure out more about her. She has a website called The Revelation Zone. It has a whole bunch of stuff on it, including videos, frequently asked questions about eternity. Some of the stuff seems straight up satirical, but I don't think it is. Like, I wonder, is it possible this is all a joke because no other explanation would suffice? Check out some of the questions she answers from kids on her website. 14-year-old Emily from Jacksonville, Florida wrote, "Are there oceans with sharks and jellyfish in heaven?" And Kat Kerr wrote, "Yes, there is a crystal sea which comes from the river of life that flows out of God's throne." Oh yeah, of course. Also, the Bible states that there are fish of all kinds in the water, and the crystal sea is big enough to hold huge sailing ships. Another question from Trey, who is age 6 from Richmond, Virginia. Question, is letting Trey write to this woman a form of child abuse? I think that's something we should consider. 6-year-old Trey asks, is there an art easel and a T-Rex in heaven? Kat Kerr says yes to both questions. Since I saw art galleries there, I don't know if she means she was in heaven at one point, I am certain they would have easels to paint on. Also, there are representations of all animal life that God originally created, so dinosaurs, including the T-Rex, can be seen in the park area of heaven. Ah, the park area, of course. They are so tame that you can actually ride on them. That's right. There are tamed T-Rexes living in the park area of heaven next to the easels which must exist because Kat Kerr knows that there are art galleries in heaven, and if there are art galleries, there must be easels with which the art is made. This is dangerous. This is dangerous. Children should not be exposed to this woman. We've previously discussed on the program, we haven't done this for a while, and I'm now getting myself fired up and talking about it. We've previously discussed on the program, is it a form of child abuse to place the irrational fear of going to hell in the minds of children from a young age? It is other forms of causing irrational fear or persistent fear in children can be considered child abuse. Is the fear of hell, rather, considered child abuse in some way, shape, or form? That's something we've discussed. This is crazy to let children interact with this woman, and this might not come as a huge shock to you. This woman is a big Trumpist. I was looking through her Twitter account yesterday. She has tweets about Trump 2020 events and just how great the National Day of Prayer is and this type of thing. Is that surprising to you? Did anybody think from the video of her trying to hit the hurricane with a stick in the name of Jesus that she might have been a Bernie supporter? I don't know that many people were confused about that, but in case you were, this is a major Trump supporter. Really wacky stuff. And I guess what she didn't work because the storm still hit. But the way that these folks work, if you were to confront her, she would say, well, no, I did move the hurricane. My prayer with the stick made it so that even more people weren't killed by Hurricane Dorian, which is, of course, exactly the type of unfalsifiable belief that doesn't really pass muster if you apply even an iota of critical thinking. This is not a joke. This stuff ruins people's lives. It completely takes over their worldview. In a sort of unrelated but related story of religious nuttery, we really recently found out that one of the main pushers or advocates of so-called conversion therapy, where people can get therapy to stop being gay, is a gay man. And I know it didn't come as a shock to me. I'm guessing it doesn't come as a shock to many people in our audience, but this stuff is not just, oh, these are just their beliefs and everyone's entitled to their beliefs and blah, blah, blah. Okay, they're entitled to their beliefs, but they're using those beliefs in a weaponized form to ruin the lives of gay and lesbian people, to ruin the lives of children with irrational fears and beliefs that are not based in reality. This actually has a real world impact. And it also has the impact, by the way, if you're really religious and you think something like this works, you might choose not to evacuate for the hurricane because you think Kat Kerr is going to use her stick and get the hurricane out of the way, then you get killed by the hurricane. This stuff has a real world impact, and we cannot write it off as just benign spirituality because it's simply not that. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. I'm getting different versions of this question more and more. Take a listen to this.
Yeah, David, this is Brian from Utah. I was just wondering what your thoughts on the easiest way of beating Biden in the Democratic primary would be for either Sanders or Warren to drop out, maybe to consolidate the progressive vote. It just kind of seems like they're taking away votes from each other. Anyway, I just wanted your thoughts on that, if that would work, if that's a good idea, and how that would play out. All right, thank you.
Yeah, so listen, I'm getting different versions of this question more and more. If Bernie drops out, Warren gets his support, crushes Biden. If Warren drops out, Bernie gets her support, crushes Biden. I understand the implicit logic of it. They are the two most progressive candidates. Therefore, certainly, if people who like Bernie can no longer support Bernie because he's out, they'd go to Warren and vice versa. The polls don't bear this out. There seems to be a very demographically aligned second choice for both Bernie and Warren. From the last poll I saw on second choices, a plurality of Bernie voters would go to Biden if Bernie were to lose or leave the race. A plurality of Warren supporters would go to Kamala Harris if Elizabeth Warren were to lose or leave the race. Demographically, that makes sense. Ideologically, it doesn't make sense, and we need to account for that. So if people have other polls that suggest different trajectories for Bernie voters and Warren voters, respectively, if the two candidates were to lose or leave the races, their respective races, let me know. But from what I've seen, it is not mathematically obvious that either Bernie or Warren abandoning these races would lead to a consolidation of support around the other candidate such that they would surpass Joe Biden. If Bernie bails, it may actually boost Biden more than Warren. If Warren bails, it may boost Harris more than Bernie. And Joe Biden may still be in the lead, which is why I think we should be cautious about assuming that the path forward is for one of the two, Bernie or Warren, to say, I'm out in order to help the other person. Now, if they left and said, please support X, if Bernie said, I'm getting out, please support Warren, or if Warren said, I'm getting out, please support Bernie, that may change the dynamics, but that is not what the polling for now seems to suggest. Disagree with me? Have contradictory polling data? Let me know. We've got a great bonus show for you today. We will talk about the conversion therapy group founder who has come out as gay and apologized. We will talk about Democrats continuing to want to look into Donald Trump's hush money payments to mistresses. And we will talk about a non-drinker who was wrongly charged with driving under the influence, who has now picked up a nice settlement from New York City. All of those stories and more on the bonus show. Become a member at joinpacman.com or a patron at patreon.com/DavidPakmanShow to instantly get access to the world-famous bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.